Have you ever stopped to think that maybe the most random moments in your life weren't random at all? We're about to look at a hidden pattern that shows how God uses these unplanned connections to weave a story that's so much bigger than our own. Just think about it for a second. Who are those people who completely changed the direction of your life? The ones you can't imagine your story without. Chances are you never saw them coming, right? They just showed up, seemingly out of nowhere, and everything changed. It's always those little things, isn't it? The job you didn't get, which led you to another one. The trip you almost skipped. That one conversation with a stranger. On the surface, it just feels like luck or chaos. But here's the question that changes everything. What if, behind all that seeming chaos, there's a design, a purpose? What if every single one of those accidents was actually a quiet invitation from heaven, a divine arrangement, gently pulling you into a story that is so much grander and more beautiful than you could ever write for yourself? You know, this isn't some new idea. To really get it, we've got to go way back and see how God has been working this way all along, especially with some of history's most unlikely heroes. I mean, try to imagine it. A world with just so much uncertainty. You couldn't just pull out a phone for directions. There was no safety net. Taking a journey was a real risk. And yet, it's in that world that God did some of his most detailed, purposeful work. Let's start with Joseph. His journey didn't begin with a dream and a plan. It began with the ultimate unplanned catastrophe. His own brothers betrayed him. He was thrown in a pit, sold like property, and carted off to a foreign land. By any earthly measure, his story was over. But that's the thing, that horrific accident, that bondage, God used it. It wasn't a detour from his destiny, it was the very road to it. It put him in the exact right place to interpret a dream and save entire nations from starvation, including the family that sold him out. Or think about Ruth. Her story kicks off with deep loss. Her husband dies. She's not looking for a fresh start or a big opportunity. She's a foreigner, a Moabite, who simply decides to stick with her grieving mother-in-law Naomi, following her into a land that wasn't hers. And just watch what God does. This simple act of loyalty leads her to glean in a random field, a field that just happened to be owned by a man named Boaz. They are chance meeting, not a chance at all. It was a divine appointment that put this faithful outsider right into the family line of King David and eventually Jesus himself. And then you've got Esther, an orphan, a Jewish girl living in exile. She didn't exactly send in a resume to be queen. No, she was taken, swept up by the Persian Empire and dropped into the king's palace. It was a terrifying circumstance forced right on top of her. But her placement was no accident. Heaven had a plan. Her unexpected, even scary position of power became the very shield God used to save his people from being completely wiped out. She was there for such a time as this. You see the pattern? Joseph, Ruth, Esther. None of them planned their position, but God absolutely planned their purpose. So you might be thinking, okay, if God is weaving all these purposeful connections, why does my life feel so chaotic and messy so much of the time? Well, that's because there's a bigger story happening underneath everything, a hidden spiritual conflict. See, on one side, you have the enemy's work, always trying to create deception, disruption, and to scatter us into meaningless chaos. But on the other side, you have God's work, always creating covenant, calling us by name, and gathering us into his purpose. Think back to Joseph. His brother's deception was meant to scatter him, but God's calling gathered him in that very place to fulfill a promise. So often, what feels like an accident in our lives is actually the battlefield where these two agendas are clashing. And the absolute climax of this entire story, the ultimate unexpected bond, was when God himself stepped into our mess, when Jesus Christ entered our broken world. He wasn't some invited dignitary. He was born into a hostile world, but his coming created the ultimate connection, the final bridge between a scattered people and a gathering God. So what on earth does this ancient pattern mean for you, right here, today? How does it help make sense of the confusing, messy, unplanned parts of your own story? Let's give this a name. Let's call them divine intersections. These are those moments that feel like a setback, a disappointment, a confusing season, a wrong turn, but they are the very places where God steps in and transforms them into purposeful connections that ultimately bring him glory.
I really want you to let this sink in. The people in your life right now, they're not random. The season you're in, no matter how hard it is, it's not meaningless. That struggle you're facing is not for nothing. Scripture promises that God orders the steps of the righteous. And while that doesn't mean every step feels good, it does mean every single step is part of his beautiful plan.
And you know what? This pattern only gets more and more intense as we move forward. Right now, God is at work aligning hearts that beat for Him, positioning His people as witnesses. He's preparing a bride for the return of Jesus. Every connection, every season, it's all part of that beautiful preparation. All of this points us toward our ultimate hope. Every confusing intersection, every temporary bond in this life, it's all preparing our hearts for the final, perfect gathering. Because one day the struggle ends, the confusion is over, all the fragile relationships and painful seasons will fall away. Christ will return and establish his kingdom, a place of perfect unity, perfect justice, and a perfect sense of belonging, where every one of us is finally, fully home. So, if your story feels a little messy today, if things feel confusing, if this season just feels like a total accident, please take heart. Heaven is still writing your story. Christ is still calling your name, and he is not calling you into chaos. He's calling you into his purpose. So I'll just leave you with this to think about. When you look at your life right now, at the people and the situations around you, which unplanned bond, which seemingly accidental connection do you think God might be using for his purpose in this very season?